Welcome to episode 1 of a brand new series called the Housebuilders podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Close Brothers Property Finance and Show House magazine, and during the series we'll be covering all the key themes and topics across the house building industry. My name is Rupert Bates. I am editorial director of Show House magazine, the leading trade title for UK house builders, and the new build platform whathouse.com. I'm delighted for our very first podcast, entitled Building for the Future, to introduce our guest today. First of all, we have Paul Dipino. Paul has over 25 years' experience in the property industry, previously as an agent, developer, investor, and now is the Chief Innovation Officer of Joseph Homes. We also have Bradley Gold. Bradley started Gold Developments alongside his father in 1996. Since when they have been building much loved and award-winning homes, including their passive eco-home scheme in Faversham, Kent, which was a gold winner at the What House Awards last year for Best Sustainable Development. And finally, we have Dan Joyce. Dan is a long-standing member of the Close Brothers Property Finance team, starting as a lending assistant in 2000, working his way up whilst growing a substantial residential lending portfolio, and was promoted to director in 2015. Dan is an advocate for supporting the next generation of SME house builders in building homes of the future. So it's fantastic to welcome you all, gentlemen, and a big thank you to Close Brothers Property Finance for hosting us in your fantastically renovated offices. So, Paul, obviously the title of the podcast, Building for the Future. I don't want to condemn the entire industry, but we're not very good at building for the future, are we? We tend to be reactive rather than proactive, and we now talk about modern methods of construction. But what does that mean to you? What does building for the future mean?
Well, I'm personally really excited about this because I think the industry is looking forward much more than it ever has. As you look around the world, there's some really exciting things happening. There are companies printing homes in America that I've been following, which is really exciting. There are folding concepts coming out. There's obviously the volumetric approach of building an entire home in a factory. We're not necessarily a fan of that. And modern methods of construction, this tagline, covers a whole remit of things from printing one component in a factory to building the whole home and everything in between. So Joseph Homes as a business, we don't necessarily think that building an entire home and putting it on a truck and shipping a lot of air necessarily makes sense. We're looking very much more into a sub-component assembly model where all of the components are built off-site, so bathroom pods, utility pods, kitchens, and brought together on-site. And that gives much more flexibility for our products, and we think is perhaps a more flexible approach to use. I'm out talking to lots of people about this. We're seeing more and more people, almost everyone is having to look at this and react to it now, which is fantastic. And I think, therefore, we will see huge change over the next 5 to 10 years. One small anecdotal thing that I picked up on recently and is a consequence of the pandemic, it's really hard to get labour. There's not many bricklayers around. Apparently, to produce brick slips, what happens at the moment is a brick gets cut into 3, they throw the middle bit around. People are starting, innovation is starting to happen because people are starting to think, that can't make sense. How can we do that in a factory, in the dry, and get a really high quality product? And as much as anything, people like us, we're asking our supply chain for this. We're really challenging them now about how product's being made, what's its carbon content, how much embodied carbon is in that product. We've got net zero carpet and tile suppliers now, which is fantastic. That data just wasn't there a few years ago. So I'm a sleepy construction industry, I think, is finally waking up, and we're going to see huge change. And we'll look back and it'll be remarkable how far that's moved. And
Bradley, we love an acronym, don't we? MMC, Modern Methods of Construction. What does it mean to you as a developer? And do you think, crucially, that translates to the consumer? Do they have any clue what this supposed sort of revolution is?
Well, I think answering the second question first, I think the consumer does need a lot of educating in this field. I think at the end of the day, they are just looking at the finished product and how much does it cost? Can they afford it? The economics are a massive factor in this whole debate. I mean, in terms of the modern methods of construction, it seems to me to mean different things to different people. It's everything from timber frame to, as Paul mentioned, 3D laser built properties. It's a huge topic. There's a certain inevitability about the movement towards modern methods, but my view is that it's very much going to be economics driven. It can only work if it is saving cost. As far as the consumer is concerned, they walk into a house. Is it in the right location? Does it have enough space for the family? And what does it look and feel like? And I don't think the modern methods of construction really change that very much. And I think that's probably why properties have not incorporated these new revolutionary ideas, because we are focusing on what the consumer is looking at rather than the production methods.
In that sense, it should really be more evolution rather than revolution, shouldn't it? We've got Mark Farmer, who's a MMC champion for the government, and he's written fascinating papers on it. But it's this sort of modernise or die rhetoric I have some issues with. I mean, do you think maybe that's a bit dangerous? It sort of lumps all the cards on the future, whereas presumably a hybrid model where there's still room for traditional is the better route forward. If you add on all the key ingredients of eco homes and passive homes, for example, when you set out with the Faversham scheme, was it very much with the intention we're going to make this a mold-breaking, sustainable scheme? Was that what you set out to achieve, really, from the word go?
There were a number of factors involved in us making the decision to go with it. It was a very big and difficult decision to make. It's never comfortable being at the cutting edge, as it were. But as a company, we are obviously very conscious of the environment and trying to improve things, and climate change and all those big headline issues. So yes, in all our properties, we are looking at ways of making them more eco-friendly. The Passive House scheme was effectively the pinnacle as we saw it. So when a site came along where the economics stacked up and we could actually consider building it as a Passive House scheme, we jumped at the opportunity. But the other factor that was very much in our minds was, this gets us ahead of the curve. It's my belief that, in 5 years, 10 years' time, all homes are going to be built to, if not a Passive House standard, then something very similar. And, if we can get ahead of the game and start learning about the pitfalls and the advantages of building to those eco standards, then that can only be good for our business and our reputation going forward. So those were the motivating factors behind it. We just had to wait until the right site came along that the economics stacked up, because there is a cost element in all these innovations.
And talking of economics stacking up, Dan, obviously Close Brothers hugely supportive, particularly of SME house builders who are being very innovative in the main, but presumably that comes with risks attached. Is there almost like a modern method of lending to go alongside this movement?
Bradley's point is it generally comes down to the economics. As a lender, we're always looking at what the demand for the ultimate product is. So, if the economics work, we can see that there's sufficient demand for the product. And, we ultimately have to look at whether the potential buyer can be supported by the mortgage in the industry. So there's other elements to this moving forward. Then we'll be keen to support those who want to be innovative in the industry. And I think when we look forward to sort of 2025 and new home standards and, the removal of fossil fuels, etc., through the house building industry, that is going to be a time, we're seeing it already, when real progression will be made within the industry. And I think everyone will have to get used to that. And it will be an expectation for all developers moving forward.
Bradley, a key thing, obviously, in all this, there is the aesthetic of a new home, isn't it? And design and the look and feel. I think last weekend, the big Telegraph headline, "Why are new builds so ugly?" which I thought was a bit harsh. They obviously hadn't seen the What House Award winners, obviously. But, or the Evening Standard, the second best new homes accolades in the industry. But yeah, in that sense, again, it comes back to that consumer, isn't it? And we haven't even mentioned the P word, the planning word. Where does that sit? Again, surely it's incumbent on local authorities and maybe they are doing this. I'm not sure in terms of actually helping you by the fact that you passive houses, the whole energy efficiency. Does that help get through the planning process, or is planning as it's always been?
Not that we've found, no. Simple answer. I think the planners, as always, are going to have input into what the development looks like in a very general term. They'll choose the materials and so on and so forth. But they still look at it very much as a tick box exercise. They're not really swayed by the fact that you've got a cutting edge, really attractive design. The planning process is quite a blunt instrument. I think it's up to the house builders and the developers to actually come up with the schemes that are attractive. We always believe that the design has got to be right for the customer to be interested in buying the house. So, it's very much at the forefront of our developments. And, whether that's a traditional design or something more modern and daring like Faversham, Fairbrook Grove, it is, it's a commercial judgment again. It's got to be the right design for the right location.
And Dan, from your point of view, I mean, there's Bradley's use of the word daring. That must make a banker flinch, right? But no, in all seriousness, I think some very well-respected property journalists once called Close Brothers Property Finance bankers in hard hats. And it's true, as a business, you very much get your boots dirty, don't you? And you must look at an awful lot of house building schemes. Do you often have that almost a dilemma? You think, yeah, this is great, this is daring, this is bold, this is what we need, but unfortunately it doesn't fit your lending criteria, or there is too much risk attached. Does that cause a slight dilemma in your mind?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's a fair observation. We've all seen and had opportunities land on our desks that are creative, I would say, from an aesthetics point of view. But ultimately, it comes down to, we want to lend the money, we want to work with a developer, but ultimately, as both Paul and Bradley have said, there's an economic end to this, and it's about the saleability. So we want to make sure that if it is slightly daring, does it fit within the sort of ethos of the area where it's situated? So when you look at things over the future, like hoof houses, those type of designs, you certainly don't necessarily want to be developing a number of those in a nice historic Victorian street. You want to be developing those or funding those in an area where you think actually the buyers will appreciate them. And then from a risk perspective, when we're lending, obviously we can go down the risk curve in terms of the type of people we're dealing with, in terms of LTV lending, etc. So there's always a way to structure it. But I think ultimately, going back to your original point, yeah, there is a sort of an initial question mark over, who is actually going to buy these? Is there going to be sufficient demand out there for the product?
And do you think, Bradley, we almost need a sort of new glossary of terms, as it were? We talk net zero, we talk MMC, carbon emissions, whatever. But I mean, the general public, do they actually know what that means in the context of a new home? I mean, wouldn't it be great, presumably, if someone came and looked round your show home and the first question they asked, rather than how much, was, is it net zero, for example, rather than can I get it through Help to Buy, what are the features, etc.? Do you think we need to change that mindset? That again, it's about education?
It is about education. And I think there's two aspects. One, I think at the moment, the consumer is becoming increasingly aware of running costs. So from their point of view, if you are able to sell a property on the basis that it is low energy and it will save them money, they buy into that. What they don't look at is the lifetime environmental cost of the property. They're not interested in that at all. Very similar to cars. People are happy to look at electric cars because the running cost is, a third of running a petrol car. Whether they're prepared to then start asking questions about the environment impact of making the batteries or not, I don't think they are interested in that. It's purely and simply what's their day-to-day cost. And I think that's the same with homes. I think, as I say, it's for the industry and for regulation to start looking at the lifetime cost of a home in environmental terms.
And Paul, again, that comes back to design and the fact as SMEs, you're by definition developing on your doorstep. So it's very important to keep the standards high, where perhaps with the mainstream builders, it's more duck in and duck out. I suppose it leads on to the whole neighbourhood, the whole environment, isn't it? We're talking about the bricks and mortar in the most eco sense, but is there a wider community aspect to all this, but maybe we're overlooking?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of our fundamental principles we've always had in terms of design is that we want to, for the rest of that building's life, be able to drive by and be proud of it. You know, there's a lot of buildings you can't say that about. And we've always really focused on what our buildings look like. Obviously, what's inside of them and the energy strategy and all of that is really, really important as well. And we've really been doubling down on that. Absolutely. Another one of our stakeholders is our neighbours and our neighbourhoods we're part of. So we became a B Corp last year, which was really exciting for us, and we were really proud. We now have to have regard to neighbourhoods, planets, our people, and our customers, and that makes perfect sense for any business. So we've always been really focused on our neighbourhoods, and there's a concept called 20-minute neighbourhoods at the moment. I live in effectively one of those at the moment. I live near Richmond. At the weekends, I only ever use my bike. I can get everywhere on my bike and do what I need to do with my kids. We recently got our largest ever planning consent through last month in Gravesend for 1,500 homes. And we very much modelled that on this concept of sustainable transport, all of the uses people need on their doorstep. And also this concept of get to know your neighbours, community. I mean, that's been so important to all of us during the lockdowns we've had. And I feel very lucky with my community. I know everyone in my road. The ones I didn't, I certainly met during lockdown, and that made it much easier. So we were really focused. And when you look around the world where this concept came from, these places are nicer to live. And that translates to all sorts of benefits for customers. So yeah, we're really focused on that. And we consider it one of our stakeholders as a business. And
Paul, you've mentioned B Corp already. Can you, in very basic terms, tell us what that certification means?
Yeah, as a business, we have what's called our Live Well Manifesto, which is what we are doing for our biggest stakeholders, which is planet, customers, company and people, and the environment. And so this was always really important to us as a business. So we'd read about B Corp, really admired companies that are B Corps like Patagonia. In fact, we give Yvonne Chopinard's book to all of our new staff when they join. So it'd always been on our agenda, and we applied last year and was really proud to get accepted. So it was a sign that we're doing really well on all of those stakeholders, all of those stakeholders. And for us, it was a way of us enshrining it into the business, because as part of the process, you have to change your company memo and arts. So we now have a legal requirement to consider those stakeholders in all of our decisions. So when that comes to the planet, we build houses. So we need to do the best we possibly can. And that's why, we're saying we want to build homes for a better world, because we've got to. There's no second option of this. The planet's not going to survive otherwise. So for us, it was, and another important thing was it's somebody external holding us to account, because we need to recertify every 3 years very publicly. We need to report via an impact reports each year. So it's very publicly reporting back and holding us to account on how we're doing. So we felt that was really important to us, our staff, and all of our other stakeholders.
And Dan, I keep asking yourself whether you're conflicted. This, I'm afraid, is another. Are you conflicted? Because your primary role, you're lending, you're funding developments. Are there sometimes schemes that land on your desk where you say, this is an absolute surefire winner, but I'm not very happy with such and such? The ethos, potentially, the philosophy, maybe it's around sustainability, but commercially it's an absolute winner.
I don't think we necessarily go into that much detail. I mean, it's good to see that someone is considering sort of the environmental impact, and they're meeting the requirements from planning, from government, etc. And I think we all need to be thinking about the future and what our planet's going to look like in the next sort of 10 to 50 years. I mean, ultimately, when we're making a decision around lending application, if there's something that reputationally causes us an issue, then we would clearly stand back. But I think we have to leave the quality of the people we're dealing with to control the way they're going to push their developments forward and the way they're going to act in terms of their own reputation.
I suppose in an ideal world, you wouldn't lend unless it very much delivered environmentally, would you? Planners simply wouldn't give planning. All those things have to come into play, don't they?
Yeah, I think that's without doubt. And we can now look forward to, you've potentially got green mortgages coming forward. So that's another area where actually it can sort of meet the chain, if you like. So touching on your point, if everyone sort of fits into that sort of loop and it all joins the dots, then we can obviously see a quicker change. But again, I think only time will tell to see whether the sort of green mortgages side of things will work. And obviously that will promote developers such as sort of Bradley and Paul to sort of push their ethos forward. It obviously gives us confidence as a bank and as a lender, knowing that if people hit these sort of environmentally regulations and requirements, that there are mortgages out there for people to buy, and again that will drive demand. So it all fits in together without doubt.
And Bradley, there'll always obviously be bumps in the road ahead, but overall, are you excited by the house building of tomorrow? I mean, with a fair wind and with everything in place, what can be achieved? I mean, it's quite an exciting time right now, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I love it. I love innovation. So yeah, in that sense, it is exciting. It's challenging too. I mean, one of the issues we face as house builders is that, we are always looking to bring a product to market in 2, 3, 4 years' time. And knowing what the environment is going to be like in 2, 3, 4 years' time is a really difficult job. So yeah, it's exciting and challenging at the same time.
Likewise, Paul, your crystal ball, your title after all says it all, doesn't it? Chief Innovation Officer. That's a great title, by the way. That means you have to do what it says on the tin, on your business card, effectively.
I'm really, really excited about what, the next period. I think that we can be a huge part of the solution. I think that we can get to net zero. We can offset lots of carbon. We can make homes balance the grid, store energy, use them effectively as batteries. And, there's lots of exciting things and do all of this while increasing supply. Because obviously, there's more and more demand. So really exciting. I think we can, we'll look back and there'll be more change in the next 10 years than there's been in the last 100 or so years in our industry. And I'm really excited to be leading a company that's pushing that forwards.
Right. Well, I think that's a great place to end it. I think very much on a high. There are huge challenges ahead, obviously, but it's massively exciting. And it's led by the likes of Gold Developments and Joseph Homes, producing fantastic homes and products. And of course, the likes of Close Brothers Property Finance, who are helping the house builders on their journey. I'm really, really excited by the future. So all it remains is for me to say a huge thank you to Dan, Paul and Bradley for taking part in episode 1 of our new podcast series. And once again, thank you so much to Close Brothers Property Finance, and a self-thank you to Show House Magazine. We look forward to moving on to episode 2 very shortly. Thank you.